Good morning, everyone. So we're going to be talking about swallowing and communication now. I just wanted to go over my philosophy, and I believe many others that work with progressive disorders, is to provide comfort and quality of life, despite maybe things getting harder and losing functioning over time. And my role as a speech pathologist is focusing on those aspects of eating, being able to help you eat things that you enjoy despite having those difficulties, and communication, being able to communicate your basic wants and needs, or even just connecting with each other. So 2 topics today, swallowing and communication. I'm going to talk about the issues that may arise with swallowing and speaking with MSA, and how do we manage these difficulties. The medical terminology for difficulty swallowing is called dysphagia. There are many signs and symptoms of dysphagia. I have just a few common ones listed here that I see. It could be coughing, throat clearing, maybe a wet, gurgly voice after you swallow something, or feeling something stuck in the throat after you swallow. It could even take maybe over an hour to eat and prolonged meal time, and with that, maybe even chewing slower. So when you have these issues with swallowing, there are 2 ways that we go about it. We implement maybe behavioral strategies and diet modification. Often we like to go about with behavioral strategies first. So that is you implementing some kind of behavior change with how you're swallowing. Could be as simple as eating slower, or maybe even sitting upright. I've had someone come to me with a complaint of trouble swallowing, lots of coughing, and I found that they were eating their meals sitting back in a recliner. And sitting upright at a chair happened to be the solution that really helped them. So it might seem like maybe simple solutions, maybe even common sense, but we have behaviors in regards to eating that sometimes we just don't think about until it becomes more difficult. And that's why it's great to, problem solve as a team and see a speech pathologist that can help kind of enlighten you and give you some ideas. I have some pictures here of also adaptive equipment that you can use. The cup with the blue lid here and handles, that's really nice for holding onto if you have some mobility issues, as well as the fact that there's a lid on it so it can prevent spills. It also limits the amount of liquid that comes out of it. It's called a ProVail cup, and a 5 cc amount of liquid comes out of it every single time you go to take a sip. So if you know that maybe drinking large sips of liquid makes you cough a lot, you might want to use something like a ProVail cup, because a teaspoon amount prevents you from coughing and it's more comfortable. Maybe you have trouble lifting a cup up to your mouth, and you might use something like this giraffe bottle here, where it has this long straw, so you can easily just put your head over and take a sip if you can't bring that cup up to your mouth. I've even had people where we implemented just taking smaller bites and cutting up the food into small pieces. I had someone that had a pretty traumatic choking episode on a Friday night eating pizza with all their family and friends, and they did not want to give up eating pizza. They were very determined to eat their pizza, and all power to them. So we came together, came up with a solution. Why don't we just cut this pizza up into small bites? That way you're not putting the whole thing in your mouth, not being able to manage all that cheese, right? And so this person was able to eat pizza for several months longer and enjoy it. And it made them happy. Here I have, if doing swallow strategies are not enough, you'll have to maybe modify the diet. So maybe changing the texture of the food into something softer, adding moisture, and maybe even a puree texture if you can't chew anymore. Over here, I have listed the IDSI framework. This is an international diet system that has standardized many types of diet textures, and this is used at many healthcare facilities nowadays. And so if you go from the hospital to a nursing home to maybe an outpatient clinic even, you might hear these terms or see this framework referred to. And this just helps healthcare professionals communicate, what diet we recommend for a patient. And the IDSI framework goes into more than just the solid textures. It also gets into different liquid consistencies. And so I wanted to go over some tips with thickening liquids. There are powder and gel-based thickeners. People tend to like the gel-based more. The powder will often have an odd aftertaste, and it also does not mix well with various drinks and temperatures as the gel-based thickener does. For example, the powder-based often will thicken more as you're sitting there and drinking your drink, and very often people don't want more thickener and thickened liquids than they have to have. Now this leads us into our second topic here, communication. This is so very important because this is not only how we communicate a basic want and need, such as maybe a change in positioning in your bed or wheelchair, but maybe you also just want to connect with another human being. And it's such a big part of quality of life and being human. So some of the difficulty that comes with MSA with speaking is called dysarthria. It's slurred speech and difficulty with voicing. There are more characteristics than this, but here are some common ones that I see. You might have one of these characteristics or a combination of them. They are maybe a low volume voice, slow and slurred speech. It could be fast rushes in speech and even stuttering-like qualities. You could have mono pitch, which means a reduced pitch range. Maybe you sound a little bit more monotone, and your voice can even be hoarse and breathy and rough, or it could be maybe strained and a very harsh sounding quality. And these symptoms might add up over time, and they can increase in severity over time. So when you have these difficulties with speaking, we have some general speech strategies that we teach patients, which are to speak loud, speak slower, and over-exaggerate your words. And there are two treatment programs that we can implement called LSVT, Lee Silverman Voice Treatment, and Speak Out. These were programs that were developed for Parkinson's, but we can also use them for other related disorders like MSA. It's important to trial whether or not you may benefit from it. There are some patients with MSA that may not do well with these treatment programs. And also keep in mind that at a certain point in the disease, doing an exercise program probably won't be beneficial towards, once the point where you're losing your voice or you've lost it already. So what do you do then? When it's becoming more difficult to communicate, people aren't understanding you, and these strategies and exercises, they're just no longer helping. Our solution is AAC. AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. Augmentative is supplementing your voice with some other method, as simple as maybe even writing. And alternative is using some other method completely instead of your voice. So maybe you can't even talk at all and you fully have to rely on something else. So in general, we just refer to it as AAC. And we all already use AAC in our daily lives. Think about all the electronic communication that we all do daily with emails and text messages, different chat messaging. And so when you have a problem like MSA and losing your voice, you have to rely on these other methods a lot more. So it could be as simple as downloading a free text-to-speech app. If you still have movement of your thumbs and able to text, you could download something like text-to-speech app on any Android or iPhone. And what you do is you just type in what you want to say, and then on that speaker of the phone, it will then speak out what it was that you typed in it. You can also use facial expressions and gestures, something as simple as thumbs up and thumbs down for yes, no, or even eye blinking if you have too severe weakness or paralysis of the hands. You can blink your eye 1 time for no and 2 times for yes, or maybe even smiling. I've had some people where they will smile for yes and no smile for no. You can use a communication book with pictures of activities and things in your life that relate to you. And you can even use something like an alphabet board where you and your partner may try to spell out a word that you want to communicate. Now, when you are having increasing difficulty with motor movements as the disease progresses, it may be difficult to use some of those methods with your hands. And we know with time too, you might lose your voice. And so we will look at aspects of a speech generating device. These are computer-like tablets. So I have some pictures of variations of what these might look like. They have communication softwares built on them. So you have many words and vocabulary right at your fingertips. Some of them are eye devices, and those tend to be a little bit larger. And then we also have different types of touchscreen devices as well. And here are just some examples of what those communication softwares might look like. Especially if you have trouble with reading, aphasia, or maybe some cognitive deficits, you might use some kind of software that has pictures along with labeling with words and phrases. So here you can see there are categories that you could select, like, for example, maybe names takes you into another page, and you could have listed out maybe people that are in your life along with pictures of them, just to maybe communicate that you want to talk to that person or have some kind of conversation about them. Next is a version, same kind of application, but no pictures. Tend to use that a little bit more with my MSA patients that don't have any kind of cognitive issues. And it's just words and phrases that have buttons that they can select when they want to communicate something. And these devices come with pre-generated words and phrases already on them, but you can also edit these buttons and add more of your own that relate specifically to you and your life. Here is another version of an application where it's just a keyboard. So you can free type something that comes to mind that maybe you have never put on the device. And then here's an example of just other things that you can access on the device. You can use the internet browser, YouTube. You can use social media and get on Facebook, and you can even do environmental controls on these devices. You could set up a smart home where you could be able to have buttons pressed on the device to turn on and off the lights in your place. So let's say it's difficult for you to get up out of bed to turn the light off. If you had your device placed in front of you, you could turn it off by using your device. You can also set up voice commands with a Google Assistant, Alexa, or Hey Siri. And I've had some people that really liked their Hey Siri, and we had a whole series of voice commands of, Hey Siri, what are your favorite restaurants in Palo Alto? And then it would set off the Hey Siri, and we would have fun with it. I've also had people who really enjoyed watching television, and they wanted to be able to change their channels between different sports games that were going on. And so we set up their remote on their device where they were accessing it with their eyes to select buttons on the screen, because they had paralyzed hands, could no longer change the channel with a remote. So they used their eyes on the screen, and they were able to change the channel back and forth. Here are some examples of ways that you can have these devices set up. You can have them sitting on a tabletop. Some of them come with kickstands, and you can see this guy chilling on a beanbag. He has a floor mount with wheels on it, and it can be positioned up at a couch, in a wheelchair, at a table, or maybe in bed. You can even have it positioned in front of you in bed so that you can always be able to access communication. And then right here, this man has a wheelchair mount where he can go out in the community and have his device with him at all times. I wanted to get into voice banking, also message banking, which I don't have on here. Message banking is a real-time audio recording of your voice, and it could be of anything. It could be you singing happy birthday. It could be you telling a joke. It could be maybe there's a certain way that you say somebody's name and you want that audio recording put on your device so that you could select that in moments. There's also voice banking, and this is essentially you creating your personal AI voice. And there are many software companies out there that do this, VoiceKeeper and Acapella. There is a price, a fee for this. However, Apple has now come out with personal voice under accessibility settings, and it's free. So all of you could go on your iPhone today and record your own personal voice to then use at a later time. And this can be transferred to a communication device as of this year as well. And it's important to keep in mind, though, with voice banking, you want to think about the way that your voice sounds now in this moment. That's how your voice is going to sound like with this AI voice that the software creates. So if you have really significant slurred speech and really just unintelligible, it might be difficult to do voice banking at that time. So it's really important to think ahead of time so that you can get the best voice out of this. Some of you are probably wondering, with the motoric aspects of the disease, I have a lot of difficulty using my hands and they're so weak, and maybe even become paralyzed. How do I access this device? You can use many ways. You can touch the screen. You can use a mouse or some kind of trackpad to move your hand around. You could use light button switches connected to the device so you don't have to lift your hand up to touch the screen. You can use EMG. Maybe there's a muscle that we could put an electrode on your body, with just very slight movement can help access a button on a device. You can even use eye crutches. So these glasses here that can help actually hold the eyelids open. And I have had people with MSA that have difficulty holding, being able to open their eyes at a certain point. And sometimes you might use a combination of these methods. And as the disease progresses, maybe you will go back to a speech pathologist and we will reassess and add on another way to access the device later on as it becomes difficult. And that just kind of leads me to the end here, just really stressing the importance of being able to communicate. I had this person come to me completely paralyzed, couldn't open his eyes, and for a year and a half, he was like this and could not communicate anything. And we set up an eye gaze device in front of him, and I had his wife open his eyes. And the first thing that he chose to communicate was, "I love you," to his wife, and a tear rolled down his face. So I just want to bring the importance of, even if it's just one thing or just being able to connect with each other, how important it is to be able to help somebody be able to communicate something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stevie. That was wonderful. Okay, if we have people going around here with questions, I don't see any questions online yet. I wanted to ask about insurance for the speech generating device. Can you mention that? I imagine they're very complicated, so probably a little bit pricey. Does insurance help pay for that at all?
Yeah, so especially with a disease like MSA, you are the price is gonna go up on those kinds of devices because you'll need more accessories, like maybe an eye gaze and the mounting systems, right? But whatever your insurance doesn't cover, it would be through durable medical equipment. Often we'll know what the coverage will be like if you have some other kind of durable medical equipment you've already purchased. If there's a co-payment or maybe there's no coverage at all, we can use other funding sources. So that's why I always tell people, don't let money be the reason to not get these devices. There are ways to get full coverage of them.
You mentioned on one of the slides, I think it was the second to last one, about different ways to activate one of the speech generator devices. Somebody wanted to know what EMG was. You mentioned that. So and the muscle twitch.
Yeah, so that's like the electrode that you can put on any kind of body part. Very often maybe we'll use on the face, like around the eye, and just lifting the eyebrow can help activate on the screen to select a button.
Okay, someone asks, is speech therapy problematic if their person is drooling? What do you do with that?
So very often, let's say maybe we're working on speech and voice and they're drooling a lot. I often will give them cues, swallow your saliva, right? Maybe they got a little bit of wet, gurgly voice because of the saliva sitting in their throat. And I just tell them, all right, swallow your saliva. So just giving those reminders because sometimes you're just not aware of it. And that's how we deal with it.
Okay, we had an online question come about the speech generating devices, if other languages besides English was allowed. And I know Toby Dynavox is one of our exhibitors, and I tried out the Spanish one today. So I know there's Spanish. Are there more, I assume, more languages than just English and Spanish?
There is Spanish options. And in fact, you could go between modes of having English and then going to a Spanish version, which is nice when you have family and caregivers where you're speaking multiple languages. There are other options for other types of languages too. And in fact, like I said, you can edit these buttons. So you could go in and even specifically edit putting in some other kind of language that might not be available.
Okay. Somebody asks about mutism. You mentioned earlier that maybe people might not be able to speak at some point. Um, is there anything more you can say about the challenges of having a family member who is mute and it must be a very stressful situation?
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to my story of somebody not being able to communicate for a whole year and a half and not even being able to open his eyes that whole amount of time. I wish I knew him sooner and got a device to him sooner. And it's no wonder he had a tear go down his face when he finally was able to express something.
Yeah.
So yeah, at some point in the disease, you might completely lose your voice. You become aphonic, is what we call it. And that's why it's so important to work with a speech pathologist and figure out, well, what is some other way that I can still communicate and connect with others.
Okay, somebody gives a suggestion of, you mentioned a picture book, and somebody gives a suggestion of an enlarged emoji list. I think that's very clever.
Yes, I often do
Oh, do
include
you?
that.
Oh, great.
I like to create personalized communication books. Sometimes other speech pathologists will just print out some of those general communication pages that are available to us. But I like to personalize it a little bit more and even use real life photos and photos of family members and actual restaurants that they go to. I'll Google. But I also like to do fun things like have a whole emoji list, and it's just really fun to use, like the little, some kind of smiley face with the sunglasses for cool, right? Yeah.
Nice. Somebody asked about those augmentative and adaptive devices. I already forgot what the AAC stood for. Somebody asked, does Medicare cover these? Are they often covered, at least in part, by insurance?
So, so with AAC, some of those other methods, like just with paper or gestures, obviously that's us doing that. But when it comes to some kind of device, those assistive devices, like a speech generating device, those are funded through insurance, or if not, like I said, there's other funding sources that we use to get it covered.
Okay, great. Any more questions? I think we've done. Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Stevie. Appreciate it.
Great.